The dust cloud billowed across the horizon as Virginia Harper clutched her wailing 6-month-old daughter to her chest, her trembling legs finally giving way beneath her. It was 1878 in the unforgiving Texas territory, and she had been walking for what felt like days after the stagecoach had abandoned her, a widow with an infant miles from the nearest town. As she collapsed onto the dirt road, tears streaming down her face, Virginia's thoughts drifted to her late husband, taken by typhoid just 2 months prior, leaving her with nothing but a baby and desperate dreams of reaching her cousin's homestead in Willow Creek. "Hush, Emma," she whispered, her parched lips cracking as she spoke. "Please, darling." But the infant continued to cry, hungry and uncomfortable in the merciless afternoon heat. Virginia's water canteen had emptied hours ago, and the sun beat down relentlessly on their unprotected heads. Her bonnet had blown away in the wind, and her once fine blue traveling dress was now coated with a layer of reddish-brown dust. The sound of hoofbeats reached her ears, but Virginia was too exhausted to feel fear or hope. She simply curled around her child, determined to protect her with whatever strength remained in her body. The rider approached slowly, and a shadow fell across her face. "Madam?" The deep voice carried concern. "Madam, are you all right?" Virginia squinted up at the figure silhouetted against the blazing sun. A tall man sat atop a magnificent chestnut stallion, his face obscured by the wide brim of his hat. The only features she could make out were broad shoulders and the glint of a silver star pinned to his vest. Before she could respond, Emma let out another piercing cry. The man dismounted in one fluid motion, kneeling beside them in the dust. Now she could see his face weathered but handsome, with a strong jaw and the kindest blue eyes she'd ever encountered. "My baby," Virginia managed to croak. "She's so thirsty." Without hesitation, the man reached for his canteen. "May I?" he asked, gesturing toward the infant. Virginia nodded weakly, and he gently lifted both mother and child from the dirt road. His strong arms cradled them securely as he carried them to the shade of a nearby cottonwood tree. Setting Virginia down carefully, he uncorked his canteen and helped her take a small sip. "Not too much at once," he cautioned, "little by little." After Virginia had moistened her lips, he dampened a clean handkerchief and offered it for the baby. Virginia pressed the damp cloth to Emma's lips, and the child's cries finally began to subside. The man knelt before them, his expression serious but gentle. "No more tears," he said softly, reaching out to brush a dusty tendril of hair from Virginia's face. "I'll get you both to safety, I promise." Who are you?" Virginia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Quentin Prescott," he replied, tipping his hat. "Sheriff of Willow Creek." Virginia's eyes widened. "Willow Creek? That's where I'm headed. My cousin." "Let's get you somewhere safe first," Quentin interrupted gently. "Then we can sort everything else out." He stood and whistled for his horse, which trotted obediently to his side. "Can you stand, madam?" "Virginia," she offered. "Virginia Harper, and this is Emma." Quentin smiled, and something in Virginia's chest fluttered despite her exhaustion. "Well, Miss Virginia, let's get you and little Emma to town." With remarkable gentleness for a man his size, Quentin helped Virginia to her feet and assisted her onto his horse. He handed Emma back to her mother before swinging up behind them. One strong arm encircled Virginia's waist, steadying her as the horse began to walk. "It's about 5 miles to town," he explained. "We'll take it slow. But we should make it before sundown." As they rode, Virginia leaned back against Quentin's chest, drawing strength from his solid presence. Emma had finally fallen asleep, lulled by the rhythmic motion of the horse. For the first time since her husband's death, Virginia felt safe. "What brings you to Willow Creek?" Quentin asked, his deep voice rumbling in his chest. Virginia sighed. "My husband, Thomas, passed away 2 months ago. I'm going to stay with my cousin, Eliza Jenkins. She owns the general store in town." "Ah, Mrs. Jenkins. Good woman. Her husband, Robert, is my deputy." "Yes. I remember Eliza mentioning that in her letters." Virginia hesitated. "The stagecoach driver, he said he couldn't wait for me when we stopped. Emma was fussing, and I just needed a moment to tend to her. But when I turned around, they were gone." Her voice cracked. "They took my trunk, everything I own." Quentin's arm tightened slightly around her waist. Don't worry, Miss Virginia. We'll track down that driver and your belongings. No one treats a lady that way in my territory. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, the silhouette of Willow Creek appeared in the distance. It wasn't much a main street with a dozen or so buildings, a church steeple rising above the rest, but to Virginia, it looked like salvation. Quentin guided his horse directly to a whitewashed building, with a sign declaring it Jenkins General Merchandise. A plump woman with graying hair was sweeping the porch as they approached. When she looked up and saw them, the broom clattered to the wooden boards. "Virginia," she called, hurrying down the steps. "Virginia, is that you?" "Eliza," Virginia responded, emotion welling in her throat. Quentin dismounted and gently helped Virginia down, keeping a steadying hand on her elbow as Eliza rushed forward to embrace her. "Oh, my dear girl," Eliza cried, pulling back to look at Virginia's dust-covered face. Her eyes moved to the sleeping infant. "And this must be little Emma. But what happened to you? You look terrible. Where's the stagecoach? Your things?" "It's a long story," Quentin interjected. "Mrs. Jenkins, your cousin needs rest and food. The baby, too." Eliza nodded briskly, suddenly all business. "Of course, Sheriff. Come inside, Virginia. Robert," she called into the store. "Come help." A tall, lanky man appeared in the doorway, his deputy badge gleaming on his vest. "What's all the Virginia?" Recognition dawned on his face. "We weren't expecting you until tomorrow." "The stagecoach left them stranded," Quentin explained, his voice hardening. "I found them about 5 miles out of town." Robert's expression darkened. "That new driver from the Eastern Line, I never did trust him." "We'll deal with him later," Quentin said firmly. "Right now, these ladies need our help." Within minutes, Virginia found herself seated at Eliza's kitchen table, a bowl of hot stew before her, and Emma cradled in Eliza's capable arms, being fed goat's milk from a small bottle. "You eat," Eliza insisted when Virginia tried to take the baby. "I've raised 4 children, Virginia. I think I can manage this little angel for a few minutes." Virginia turned grateful eyes to Quentin, who stood awkwardly by the door, hat in hand. "Sheriff Prescott, I don't know how to thank you." "No thanks necessary, Miss Harper. Just doing my job." He shifted his weight. "I should be going. I'll send word to the stagecoach company about your belongings." "Won't you stay for supper, Sheriff?" Eliza offered. "It's the least we can do." Quentin hesitated, his eyes meeting Virginia's. Something passed between them, a connection neither could explain. "I suppose I could stay for a bit," he finally said, hanging his hat on a peg by the door. As the evening progressed, Virginia learned that Quentin Prescott was more than just the town sheriff. He had come to Willow Creek 5 years earlier, a former Texas Ranger looking for a quieter life. He was 30 years old, unmarried, and respected by everyone in town for his fairness and courage. What she didn't learn, what she couldn't possibly know yet, was that the moment he had lifted her and Emma from the dust of that lonely road, Quentin Prescott's solitary life had changed forever. The next morning, Virginia awoke to sunlight streaming through lace curtains. For a moment, she was disoriented, until the events of the previous day came rushing back. She was in Eliza's guest room, and Emma was sleeping peacefully in a wooden cradle beside the bed, a cradle that had held all 4 of Eliza's children. After washing and dressing in a borrowed gown, Virginia made her way downstairs to find Eliza preparing breakfast. The aroma of coffee and frying bacon filled the kitchen. "Good morning, dear," Eliza greeted her cheerfully. "You look much better after a good night's sleep." Virginia smiled, feeling human again after her ordeal. "Thank you for everything, Eliza. I don't know what I would have done if—" A knock at the door interrupted her. Robert, already dressed in his deputy's uniform, went to answer it. A moment later, Sheriff Quentin Prescott stepped into the kitchen, hat in hand. "Good morning, ladies," he said, nodding politely. His eyes lingered on Virginia, taking in her transformation. With her golden brown hair neatly arranged and wearing a clean dress, she looked nothing like the desperate woman he'd found in the dust. "Sheriff," Virginia acknowledged, a blush creeping into her cheeks under his steady gaze. "I've sent telegrams about your trunk," he informed her. "And I've got some good news. The stagecoach was stopped in Cypress Bend. Your belongings are safe, and they'll be arriving on tomorrow's coach." Virginia's eyes lit up. "Oh, thank goodness! My photographs of Thomas, Emma's christening gown, I thought they were gone forever." Not on my watch, Quentin said with a small smile. I also wanted to let you know that I've arranged for the company to refund your fare. What that driver did was inexcusable. That's wonderful news. Sheriff, Eliza exclaimed, gesturing to the table. Won't you join us for breakfast? I've made plenty. Again, Quentin's eyes sought Virginia's, seeking her approval. She nodded almost imperceptibly, and he accepted the invitation. As they ate, Virginia learned more about Willow Creek. It was a growing town situated near a railroad line that was bringing more settlers each month. There was a school, a church, and even a small hotel for travelers. The town's changing, Robert commented between bites of biscuit. Not like when we first arrived, eh, Quentin? The sheriff nodded. Progress comes whether we want it or not. Still, it's a good place, peaceful mostly. Mostly? Virginia questioned. A shadow crossed Quentin's face. We have our troubles, like anywhere. The Dalton brothers have been causing problems at isolated homesteads. Nothing for you to worry about, though. The Daltons? Virginia asked, suddenly concerned. A gang of rustlers and thieves, Robert explained. They've been operating in the territory for a couple of years now. Quentin almost caught their leader last month. Almost isn't good enough, Quentin said grimly. They wounded Mrs. Thornton during their last raid. A 60-year-old woman, shot while defending her home. Virginia's hand flew to her mouth. Is she all right? She'll recover, Quentin assured her. But I won't rest until those men are behind bars. The conversation was interrupted by Emma's cries from upstairs. Virginia excused herself to tend to her daughter, and when she returned with the baby in her arms, Quentin was preparing to leave. Mrs. Jenkins mentioned you might be looking for work, he said somewhat hesitantly. The school teacher, Miss Winters, is getting married next month and moving to Denver. The town council is searching for a replacement. Virginia's eyes widened. I was a teacher before I married Thomas. I taught at a girls' school in St. Louis for 3 years. Perfect, Quentin smiled. There's a meeting tonight at the town hall, 7 o'clock. If you're interested, I could escort you. Virginia glanced at Eliza, who nodded encouragingly. I'd be happy to watch Emma, her cousin offered. Then yes, Virginia decided. I would appreciate the escort, Sheriff. Quentin, he corrected gently. Please call me Quentin. That evening, Quentin arrived promptly at 6:30, dressed in a clean shirt and vest, his badge polished to a shine. Virginia had spent the afternoon altering one of Eliza's dresses to fit her slimmer frame, a navy blue cotton with white piping that complemented her hazel eyes. You look lovely, Miss Harper, Quentin said sincerely as she descended the stairs. Virginia, she reminded him with a smile, and thank you. The town hall was a short walk from Eliza's home. As they strolled down the main street, Quentin pointed out the various businesses, the blacksmith shop, the barber, the small hotel, and the saloon. The Silver Spur is respectable enough, he explained. Jim Kelly runs a clean place, no working girls, and he doesn't serve the troublemakers. Virginia appreciated his candor. In her grief over Thomas, she had forgotten what it was like to have a man's attention, to engage in simple conversation that wasn't clouded by sympathy or pity. The town hall was already filled with people when they arrived. Quentin guided Virginia to a seat near the front, his hand resting lightly at the small of her back. The touch sent an unexpected warmth through her body. Mayor Hiram Foster, a portly man with impressive whiskers, called the meeting to order. After discussing various town matters, he finally addressed the issue of the school. As you all know, Miss Winters will be leaving us at the end of the month. We need a teacher for our children. He peered over his spectacles at the assembly. Sheriff Prescott informs me that we have a qualified candidate right here in town. Miss Harper? Virginia stood, her heart pounding. It's Mrs. Harper, actually. I'm a widow. She paused, gathering her thoughts. I taught for 3 years at the Langley School for Girls in St. Louis. I'm qualified to teach all the common subjects, as well as music and French. A murmur of approval rippled through the crowd. A woman near the back raised her hand. Do you have experience with younger children? My Johnny's only 6. Virginia smiled. I have a 6-month-old daughter of my own, madam, and at Langley I taught girls as young as 7. I believe children learn best when they're engaged and treated with respect. More questions followed about her teaching philosophy, how she would handle discipline, and whether she could manage the one-room schoolhouse with students of varying ages. Virginia answered confidently, drawing on her experience and her genuine love of teaching. When the questioning ended, Mayor Foster called for a vote. The result was unanimous. Virginia Harper would be Willow Creek's new school teacher, starting the following month. As they walked home under a canopy of stars, Quentin couldn't hide his admiration. "You impressed them all, even old Mrs. Guthrie, and she hasn't approved of anything since President Grant was in office." Virginia laughed, feeling lighter than she had in months. "I'm just grateful for the opportunity. Teaching again, it feels right." They paused outside Eliza's home, neither quite ready to end the evening. Quentin cleared his throat. "I was wondering if you and Emma might like to join me for a picnic on Sunday after church. There's a nice spot by the creek that gives the town its name. It's peaceful there." Virginia hesitated. It had been only 2 months since Thomas's death. Was it too soon to be enjoying another man's company? But something about Quentin Prescott made her feel safe, respected, and, if she was honest with herself, alive again. "We'd like that very much," she finally said. "Thank you, Quentin." He tipped his hat, a smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. "Good night, Virginia. Sweet dreams." As Virginia watched him walk away, she realized that for the first time since becoming a widow, she was actually looking forward to tomorrow. The days leading up to Sunday passed quickly. Virginia's trunk arrived as promised, and she spent hours reacquainting herself with her possessions, particularly the silver frame photograph of Thomas on their wedding day. Looking at his kind face, she felt a pang of guilt about her growing feelings for Quentin. "I miss you," she whispered to the photograph. "I'll always love you, but I have to find a way forward for Emma and me." On Saturday, Quentin stopped by with an unexpected gift, a small rocking horse he had carved himself for Emma. "She's too young for it now," he acknowledged as he presented the beautifully crafted toy, "but she'll grow into it." The gesture touched Virginia deeply. This wasn't a man trying to court a widow with grand gestures. This was someone who genuinely cared about her child's future happiness. Sunday dawned clear and warm. After church services, where Virginia was formally introduced to the congregation as the new teacher, Quentin met them outside with a picnic basket and a blanket. "Mrs. Jenkins packed enough food for an army," he commented as he helped Virginia into his buggy, carefully securing Emma's basket beside them. The creek was indeed beautiful, lined with willows and cottonwoods that provided dappled shade. Quentin spread the blanket beneath a large tree and unpacked the impressive array of food: fried chicken, potato salad, fresh bread, and apple pie. As they ate, Virginia found herself sharing stories of her childhood in Missouri, her years at the teaching college, and her brief but happy marriage to Thomas. "He was a good man," she said softly. "A bookkeeper, not exciting or adventurous, but kind and steady. The fever took him so quickly. I barely had time to say goodbye." Quentin listened attentively, his eyes reflecting understanding rather than pity. "Losing someone you love is never easy." "My father was killed in a cattle stampede when I was 15. Changed my whole life. Is that why you became a lawman?" He nodded. "Partly. I wanted to protect people, make a difference." He smiled ruefully. "My mother wanted me to be a lawyer or a banker, someone who wouldn't get shot at." "Yet here you are, chasing bandits in the wilderness," Virginia observed. "Here I am," he agreed, his eyes never leaving hers. Emma, who had been sleeping in her basket, began to fuss. Virginia reached for her, but Quentin was quicker. "May I?" he asked. Virginia nodded, surprised and touched, as the tall sheriff gently lifted the infant, cradling her against his broad chest with practiced ease. "You're good with her," Virginia remarked, watching as Emma settled contentedly in his arms. "I have 7 nieces and nephews," he explained. "My sister lives in Austin with her husband. Their oldest is 12 now." A wistful expression crossed his face. "I always thought I'd have a family of my own by now." "Why haven't you?" Virginia asked, then immediately regretted her boldness. "I'm sorry, that's far too personal." "No, it's a fair question." Quentin looked down at Emma, who had wrapped her tiny hand around his finger. "The right woman never came along, I suppose. This job doesn't make for an easy home life, and most women don't want to be married to a man who might not come home one night." The honesty of his answer touched Virginia. "I think," she said carefully, that when you love someone, you accept the risks that come with their calling. Thomas wasn't a dangerous man, but he died anyway. Life offers no guarantees. Their eyes met over Emma's head, and something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement of mutual understanding, of possibilities. The peaceful moment was shattered by the sound of approaching horses. Quentin tensed, gently passing Emma back to Virginia and rising to his feet in one fluid motion. His hand moved to the pistol at his hip. "Stay here," he instructed, moving toward the path. 3 riders appeared through the trees, and Virginia's heart raced with fear until she saw Quentin relax slightly. "Deputy," he called to Robert, who was leading the group. "What brings you out here?" "Sorry to interrupt, Sheriff," Robert replied, dismounting. "But the Daltons hit the Russell place this morning, stole horses and burned the barn. Mr. Russell's been shot." Quentin's expression hardened. "How bad?" "Doc Miller's with him now, says he'll live." But it was close. Robert glanced apologetically at Virginia. "They're heading north, toward the canyon. If we leave now, we might catch them before they cross into the territory." Without hesitation, Quentin nodded. "Give me 2 minutes." He turned back to Virginia as Robert and the other men waited discreetly by the path. "I'm sorry," he said, kneeling beside the blanket. "I have to go." Virginia nodded, fighting back her fear. "I understand. Please be careful." Quentin hesitated, then leaned forward and gently pressed his lips to her forehead. "I'll come find you when I return," he promised. Then he was gone, mounting his horse and galloping away with the other men. Virginia sat frozen for a moment, her fingers touching the spot where his lips had been. Then, gathering her composure, she packed up the remains of their picnic and prepared to return to town with Emma. The walk back to Willow Creek took nearly an hour, but Virginia barely noticed the time passing. Her mind was filled with thoughts of Quentin, his kindness, his strength, the way he had held Emma so naturally. And now he was riding into danger, pursuing violent men who wouldn't hesitate to kill a lawman. She hadn't realized how much he had come to mean to her in such a short time. When Virginia arrived at Eliza's home, she found her cousin pacing anxiously on the porch. "Thank heavens you're back," Eliza exclaimed, hurrying to take Emma. "I was worried when I heard about the Daltons." "Quentin Sheriff Prescott went after them with Robert and some others," Virginia explained, following Eliza inside. "How badly was Mr. Russell hurt?" "Shot in the shoulder, from what I hear. Martha Russell came into the store for bandages. She said they took 4 horses and all the money they had hidden in the house." Eliza shook her head grimly. "Those Daltons are getting bolder. I worry about Robert and Quentin going after them." Virginia sank into a chair, her earlier happiness now overshadowed by concern. "How dangerous are they, really?" "Quentin mentioned them, but he didn't say much." Eliza sighed, settling Emma in her cradle. 3 brothers and a couple of other men. They've robbed stagecoaches, rustled cattle, and now they're hitting farms and ranches. They killed a man over in Cypress Bend, last year shot him in the back when he tried to defend his property. Virginia's hand flew to her mouth. "And Quentin and Robert are chasing them with just one other man? That's their job, dear." Eliza patted Virginia's shoulder. "They've faced worse. Robert's been deputy for 8 years, and Quentin, well, he was a ranger. He knows what he's doing." Despite Eliza's reassurances, Virginia slept poorly that night, her dreams filled with gunfire and faceless bandits. She awoke at dawn to the sound of horses in the street below. Rushing to the window, she saw Quentin dismounting in front of the sheriff's office across the way, his clothes dusty and his face grim. Without thinking, Virginia threw a shawl over her nightgown and hurried downstairs. Eliza was already in the kitchen, stoking the fire for breakfast. "Quentin's back," Virginia explained breathlessly as she rushed past. "I need to make sure he's all right." Eliza called something after her, but Virginia was already out the door, crossing the quiet street with her shawl clutched tightly around her. She hesitated at the sheriff's office door, suddenly aware of her improper attire and the earliness of the hour. But concern overrode propriety, and she knocked firmly. Quentin opened the door, surprise registering on his exhausted face. "Virginia, what are you doing here?" "I saw you return," she said simply. "Are you hurt?" He shook his head, stepping back to allow her inside. "No, just tired. We tracked them to the canyon, but they split up. We managed to catch one of them, the youngest Dalton boy, barely 20. He's locked up in the back." Virginia noticed the bloodstain on Quentin's sleeve. "You are hurt!" He glanced down, as if noticing the injury for the first time. "It's nothing. A bullet grazed me during the scuffle." "Let me see," Virginia insisted, her teacher's tone brooking no argument. With a sigh, Quentin removed his vest and rolled up his sleeve, revealing a shallow but nasty-looking wound across his upper arm. "Sit down," Virginia ordered, looking around the office. "Do you have any clean water and bandages?" "In the cabinet behind the desk," Quentin directed, sinking into his chair. "But really, Virginia, it's not necessary." "Be quiet and let me help you," she interrupted, already gathering supplies. "I tended Thomas through his illness. I know what I'm doing." As she gently cleaned the wound, her fingers moving with confident precision, Quentin watched her face. In the early morning light streaming through the window, with her hair falling in loose waves around her shoulders and her expression focused with concern, she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. "There," Virginia said at last, securing the bandage. "It's not deep, but you should have Doc Miller look at it later." "Thank you," Quentin murmured, his voice husky. Their faces were inches apart, and for a breathless moment, Virginia thought he might kiss her. Instead, he cleared his throat and pulled his sleeve down. "You shouldn't be here, Virginia. It's not proper, and people will talk." Reality crashed back, and Virginia stepped away, suddenly acutely aware of her nightgown and loose hair. "You're right. I wasn't thinking clearly. I was just worried." "I'm glad you were worried," Quentin said softly. "But I don't want your reputation damaged. This town respects its schoolteacher." Virginia nodded, gathering her shawl more tightly. "I should go. Eliza will be wondering where I am, and Emma will be waking soon." Quentin rose to escort her to the door. "Virginia," he said as she stepped onto the porch, "I meant what I said yesterday. I'll come find you when I've rested. There's something I want to ask you." Her heart fluttered. "I'll be at Eliza's." As Virginia hurried back across the street, she felt a curious mixture of embarrassment and elation. Whatever Quentin wanted to ask her seemed significant, and despite the impropriety of her morning visit, she couldn't bring herself to regret it. Eliza mercifully asked few questions when Virginia returned, though her knowing smile suggested she understood more than she let on. The morning passed in ordinary tasks, feeding Emma, helping with chores, reviewing the school curriculum Miss Winters had left for her. By mid-afternoon, Virginia found herself glancing repeatedly out the window, watching for Quentin. He appeared just as the church bell was striking 4, freshly bathed and wearing a clean shirt, his arm properly bandaged. Virginia met him at the door before he could knock. "You look much better," she observed, smiling. "A few hours' sleep works wonders," he replied. "Would you care to take a walk? The weather's fine." Virginia nodded, calling to Eliza that she was going out. Her cousin appeared in the kitchen doorway, Emma on her hip. "Go on," Eliza encouraged. "Emma and I are baking cookies. We'll be fine." As they strolled toward the edge of town, Virginia was acutely aware of the curious glances from townspeople. Walking out with the sheriff only days after arriving in Willow Creek was bound to generate gossip. "People are staring," she murmured. "Let them," Quentin replied, his hand coming to rest lightly at the small of her back. "I've never much cared what people think." They reached a small rise overlooking the town, where a single oak tree provided shade. Quentin gestured to a weathered bench beneath its branches. "I come here sometimes to think," he explained as they sat. "You can see the whole town from here, the people going about their lives, building something good in this wild place." Virginia followed his gaze, taking in the neat rows of buildings, the church steeple gleaming in the afternoon sun, the scattered houses with their kitchen gardens and chicken coops. "It's a lovely town." "It could be home," Quentin said quietly. "For you and Emma." Virginia turned to look at him, her pulse quickening. "Quentin, what are you saying?" He took a deep breath. "I know it's sudden. We've known each other less than a week. But, Virginia, from the moment I found you on that road, holding Emma and looking so brave despite everything, I knew you were special. Quentin, please let me finish." He took her hand in his. "I'm not asking for anything right now. It's too soon, I know that. You're still grieving Thomas, and you need time to settle here, to start your teaching. But I want you to know my intentions. I care for you, Virginia, and for Emma. I want to court you properly if you'll allow it." Virginia's eyes filled with tears. "I care for you too, Quentin. More than I thought possible after losing Thomas. But you're right, it is soon. And there's Emma to consider." "I adore Emma," Quentin said firmly, "and I would never try to replace her father in her memory. But I would be honored to help raise her, to be a father to her in every way that matters." A tear slipped down Virginia's cheek. "You are a good man, Quentin Prescott." He reached up to brush the tear away, his touch gentle. "Is that a yes? May I court you?" Virginia nodded, a smile breaking through her tears. Yes. The weeks that followed were some of the happiest of Virginia's life. She settled into her role as the town's schoolteacher, quickly winning the respect and affection of her students. Emma thrived under the combined attention of Virginia, Eliza, and Quentin, who visited almost daily, often bringing small gifts: a ribbon for Virginia's hair, a carved wooden rattle for Emma, wildflowers gathered on his patrols. Their courtship proceeded with proper decorum, but genuine affection. Quentin escorted Virginia to church each Sunday, joined the Jenkinses for dinner twice a week, and took Virginia for drives in his buggy on pleasant evenings. Always he treated her with a respect that bordered on reverence, never pushing for more than she was ready to give. As summer turned to fall, Virginia found herself falling deeply in love with the strong, gentle sheriff. The guilt she had initially felt about moving on after Thomas's death gradually eased, replaced by a certainty that her late husband would have wanted her to find happiness again. Not everything was perfect, of course. The Dalton gang remained at large, a constant shadow over the community's peace. The young Dalton they had captured refused to betray his brothers, accepting his sentence of 5 years in the territorial prison with sullen defiance. And occasional rumors of their activities: a stagecoach robbery 30 miles south, cattle rustled from a ranch to the west, kept Quentin and Robert vigilant. One crisp October evening, as Virginia was grading arithmetic papers at her desk in the schoolhouse, the door opened to admit Quentin. He removed his hat, smiling at the sight of her surrounded by books and papers. "Working late?" he asked, crossing to her desk. Virginia nodded, setting down her pencil. "The children are having trouble with fractions. I'm trying to devise a better way to explain them." Quentin leaned against the desk, his expression serious. "I need to talk to you about something important, Virginia." Her heart skipped. "What is it? Has something happened?" "Nothing bad," he assured her quickly. "But I've received a telegram from the U.S. Marshal's office in Denver. They're offering me a position as a deputy marshal for the territory." Virginia sat back, absorbing the news. "That's a great honor, Quentin." "It would mean more money," he continued, "but also more danger, more travel." He paused, his blue eyes intent on her face. "I haven't given them my answer yet. I wanted to talk to you first." "Me? Why?" But she knew why, even as she asked the question. Quentin knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "Because I love you, Virginia Harper. I love you and Emma more than I ever thought possible. And I won't take this position if it means losing you." Virginia's breath caught. It was the first time he had spoken the words aloud, though his actions had declared his feelings 100 times over. "I love you too," she whispered, the admission both frightening and liberating. A smile of pure joy lit Quentin's face. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "Then I have another question for you." Opening the box, he revealed a delicate gold ring set with a single pearl. "Virginia Harper, will you do me the great honor of becoming my wife?" Tears sprang to Virginia's eyes. "Yes," she breathed. "Yes, Quentin, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood, pulling her up into his arms. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, but quickly deepened into something more passionate as months of restrained feeling finally found expression. When they finally parted, both breathless, Quentin rested his forehead against hers. "I promise to make you and Emma happy, Virginia. To protect you with my life, if necessary." "Just come home to us," Virginia replied, her hands resting against his chest. "That's all I ask." They agreed to a December wedding after the school term ended. The news of their engagement spread quickly through Willow Creek, met with general approval, and a few knowing smiles from those who had observed their courtship. Eliza immediately began planning the celebration, insisting that her cousin deserved a proper wedding, despite being a widow. As the wedding day approached, Virginia found herself increasingly busy with preparations, while also teaching and caring for Emma, who was now crawling and attempting to stand. Quentin, meanwhile, corresponded with the marshal's office, negotiating terms that would allow him to be based in Willow Creek rather than having to relocate to a larger town. 3 days before the wedding, disaster struck. Virginia was at the schoolhouse decorating for the Christmas pageant with several of her students when Robert burst through the door. "Virginia!" he gasped, out of breath from running. "You need to come. The Daltons, they've taken hostages at the general store." Virginia's blood ran cold. "Eliza? Emma?" Robert nodded grimly. "They're inside, along with 3 other customers. The Daltons are demanding their brother's release and safe passage out of town." "Where's Quentin?" Virginia asked, already gathering her shawl. "Trying to negotiate. But Virginia, it's bad. They're desperate and they're drunk. They've threatened to start shooting hostages in an hour if their demands aren't met." Virginia turned to her students, forcing her voice to remain calm. "Children, go straight home. No detours, understand? Mary, take your little brother. John, escort Sarah and the younger ones to their houses. Go now." As the children filed out, Robert took Virginia's arm. "Quentin didn't want me to get you involved, but I thought you should know. Emma's in there." "Of course I should know," Virginia replied, a new determination hardening her voice. "Take me there." The scene on Main Street was tense. Armed townsmen had taken positions behind barrels and crates, their rifles trained on the general store. Quentin stood in the middle of the street, his stance rigid as he called up to a bearded man visible in the store's upper window. "Frank Dalton, you know I can't release your brother," Quentin was saying as Virginia approached. "He's already been transferred to the territorial prison. But if you release the hostages, I give you my word, you'll get a fair trial." A harsh laugh came from the window. "Your word ain't worth spit, Prescott. You've been hunting us for 2 years. Now we're calling the shots." Virginia stepped forward, ignoring Robert's attempt to hold her back. "Quentin," she called. He turned, his face going pale when he saw her. "Virginia, get back. It's not safe. My daughter is in there," she said steadily. "And Eliza, I'm not going anywhere." Before Quentin could argue further, a woman's scream came from inside the store, followed by a baby's wail. Emma's cry tore at Virginia's heart. "That's it," she decided, moving toward the store. "I'm going in." Quentin grabbed her arm. "Virginia, no!" "They won't hurt a woman," she insisted. "And I can calm Emma, maybe talk some sense into them." "It's too dangerous," Quentin protested. "These men are killers." "They're also someone's sons," Virginia replied. "Let me try, Quentin, please." After a moment of agonized indecision, Quentin nodded. "Be careful," he whispered, pressing a quick kiss to her forehead. Virginia walked steadily toward the store, her hands visible at her sides. "Frank Dalton," she called. "My name is Virginia Harper. My baby daughter is inside your store, and I'm coming in to get her." The bearded face appeared at the window again. "Stop right there, lady. One more step and I start shooting." "You won't shoot a mother coming for her child," Virginia replied calmly. "You're not that kind of man." "You don't know what kind of man I am," Frank growled, but there was uncertainty in his voice. "I know you're frightened," Virginia continued, taking another step forward. "I know you want to save your brother. Family is important. I understand that. But there are children in there, Mr. Dalton. Surely you don't want their blood on your hands?" There was a long pause. Then the store's front door opened slightly. "Come in," Frank called. "Just you and no tricks." Virginia glanced back at Quentin, whose face was a mask of controlled fear, then entered the store. Inside, she found a scene of terrified chaos. Eliza and 2 other women were huddled behind the counter, while a man Virginia recognized as the blacksmith sat bleeding from a head wound in the corner. Emma was in Eliza's arms, crying inconsolably. 3 armed men, the Dalton brothers, Virginia presumed stood guard, their guns trained on the hostages. "Emma," Virginia said, moving toward her daughter. The nearest Dalton, a younger man with a patchy beard, blocked her path. "Not so fast," he snarled. "You're just another hostage now." "Let her hold the baby, Jed," Frank ordered from his position by the window. Shut that brat up before I lose my mind. Jed stepped aside reluctantly, and Virginia hurried to Eliza, taking Emma into her arms. The baby's cries subsided as Virginia rocked her gently, murmuring soothing words. "Are you all right?" Virginia whispered to Eliza, noting her cousin's pale face and trembling hands. Eliza nodded. "They came in just after noon. Robert was out on patrol. They were looking for money, but when they realized who I was..." She trailed off, glancing fearfully at the Daltons. Virginia turned to face Frank, who seemed to be the leader. "Mr. Dalton, you must know this can't end well. The whole town is armed and waiting outside. Even if Sheriff Prescott could get your brother released, which he can't, you'd never make it out of town alive." Frank's eyes narrowed. "You think I care about that? They're going to hang Jeff anyway. Might as well go out taking some of Prescott's precious townsfolk with me." "And what would your mother say to that?" Virginia asked softly. The question caught Frank off guard. "My mother's dead," he said after a moment. "Fever took her 3 winters ago." "I'm sorry," Virginia replied sincerely. "I lost my husband to fever last year. It's a terrible way to go." She shifted Emma to her other arm. "But I wonder if your mother would want this for her sons, dying in a shootout or facing the gallows, when you could have a chance at a different life." "Shut up," Jed snapped. "Don't listen to her, Frank. She's just trying to trick us." "No tricks," Virginia assured them. "Just the truth. You have a choice right now. You can die today, or you can surrender and face justice. Maybe it's prison, yes, but you'd be alive. And who knows what might happen in a few years. Men have been pardoned for worse than what you've done." She could see her words were having an effect on Frank. His grip on his rifle had loosened slightly, and there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "What about Jeff?" he asked. "They're going to hang him." "Not necessarily," Virginia replied. "If you surrender peacefully, I believe Sheriff Prescott would speak on your behalf, all of you. He's a fair man, and he has influence with the territorial judge." Frank exchanged glances with his brothers. The third man, who had remained silent until now, spoke up. "Maybe she's right, Frank. Ma wouldn't want us to die like this." "Will," Frank growled warningly, but his resolve was clearly weakening. Virginia pressed her advantage. "Let the women and the injured man go, Mr. Dalton, as a show of good faith. Keep me if you need a hostage, but let them go." For a long, tense moment, Frank stared at her, measuring her sincerity. Then, abruptly, he nodded. "Fine. The women and Blacksmith Joe can go. But you stay, schoolteacher, and keep that baby quiet." Virginia passed Emma back to Eliza. "Take her to Quentin," she whispered. "Tell him I'm still negotiating." Eliza's eyes widened in alarm. "Virginia, no. Please, Eliza. Emma needs to be safe." With obvious reluctance, Eliza nodded, gathering Emma close. Frank gestured to the door with his rifle. "Out, all of you. Tell Prescott he's got 1 hour to decide if his woman's life is worth letting us ride out of here." As the hostages filed out, Virginia steeled herself for what was to come. She was terrified, but determined not to show it. These men responded to strength, not weakness. Once the door closed behind the others, Virginia turned to face the Daltons. "Now, gentlemen, let's discuss how we can all walk out of here alive." Outside, Quentin received the freed hostages with mixed emotions, profound relief at seeing Emma safe in Eliza's arms, and absolute terror at the knowledge that Virginia had remained behind. "She insisted," Eliza explained tearfully as she handed Emma to him. "She thinks she can convince them to surrender." Quentin cradled Emma against his chest, his mind racing. He knew Virginia was intelligent and persuasive. He'd seen her calm, angry parents and mediate children's disputes with remarkable skill. But the Daltons were desperate criminals, not unruly school children. "Frank says you have 1 hour to agree to let them ride out," Eliza continued. "Or they'll kill her." Quentin's jaw tightened. "That's not going to happen." He handed Emma back to Eliza and turned to Robert. "Get the men ready. If we don't hear from Virginia in half an hour, we're going in." Inside the store, Virginia had convinced the Daltons to sit down at the small table where Eliza normally tallied the day's receipts. Frank remained suspicious, but his brothers seemed increasingly receptive to Virginia's arguments. "The way I see it," she was saying, "your best option is to surrender to Sheriff Prescott. He's a former Texas Ranger, but he's also a man of his word. If he promises you'll get a fair trial, you will." A fair trial still ends with us swinging, Jed muttered. Not necessarily, Virginia countered. You haven't killed anyone in Willow Creek. The robbery and hostage-taking are serious, yes. But with the right advocate. Like who? Frank interrupted. Some territory lawyer who gets paid whether we hang or not? Virginia took a deep breath. Like me. I'll speak for you at your trial. I'll make sure the judge knows you released the hostages, that you chose a better path. Will, the youngest brother, looked at her with something like hope. You'd do that? Why? Because I believe everyone deserves a second chance, Virginia replied simply. And because I don't want to see more bloodshed today. A heavy silence fell over the table. Finally, Frank spoke. Say we do surrender. How do we know Prescott won't just shoot us the minute we step outside? Because I'll walk out with you, Virginia stated firmly. I'll stand between you and the townsmen until you're safely in custody. Frank studied her for a long moment, then glanced at his brothers. Some unspoken communication passed between them before he turned back to Virginia. You've got guts, schoolteacher. I'll give you that. He sighed heavily. All right, we'll do it your way. But if Prescott or any of those men out there makes a move, we start shooting. Understood? Virginia nodded, relief washing over her. I understand. Thank you, Mr. Dalton. Outside, the half-hour deadline was approaching. Quentin had positioned his men strategically around the store, ready to storm the building at his signal. His heart felt like lead in his chest as he checked his pocket watch again. 5 more minutes, he murmured to Robert. Just then, the store door opened. Virginia appeared, her face pale but composed. Behind her stood the 3 Dalton brothers, their hands raised in surrender. Sheriff Prescott, Virginia called, her voice steady. These men are surrendering into your custody. They ask for your guarantee of a fair trial. For a moment, Quentin couldn't speak, overwhelmed by relief and admiration. Then, recovering his professional demeanor, he stepped forward. They have my word. Frank, Jed, Will, drop your weapons and come forward one at a time. The surrender proceeded without incident. As Robert and several townsmen led the Daltons away to the jail, Quentin finally allowed himself to go to Virginia. She was still standing on the store porch, looking suddenly exhausted now that the crisis had passed. Without a word, Quentin pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. Don't ever do anything like that again, he whispered fiercely into her hair. I thought I'd lost you. Virginia clung to him, the brave facade finally crumbling as she began to tremble. They're not evil men, Quentin, just lost and desperate. I don't care if they're saints, Quentin replied, drawing back to look at her tear-streaked face. Nothing is worth risking your life. Emma was in there, Virginia reminded him. I had to do something. Quentin shook his head in wonder. You are the most remarkable woman I've ever known, Virginia Harper. And in 3 days, thank God, you'll be my wife. The Daltons were transported to the territorial capital for trial the following day, under heavy guard. True to her word, Virginia provided a written statement to the judge, detailing how the brothers had ultimately chosen to release their hostages and surrender peacefully. While this didn't absolve them of their crimes, it did result in lighter sentences, 15 years instead of hanging for Frank, and 10 each for Jed and Will. The incident seemed to bring the entire town of Willow Creek together in a new way. The near tragedy had reminded everyone of the fragility of peace and the importance of community. When Virginia and Quentin's wedding day arrived, the church was filled to capacity with townspeople eager to celebrate not just a marriage, but their town's resilience. Virginia wore a simple ivory gown that Eliza and several other women had worked on together, adding delicate embroidery and pearl buttons. Emma, now able to stand with support, wore a matching dress and sat contentedly on Eliza's lap in the front pew. As Virginia walked down the aisle toward Quentin, she reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her to this moment. Just 6 months ago, she had been a desperate widow, collapsed in the dust of a lonely road with a crying baby in her arms. Now she was about to marry a man she'd loved deeply, in a town that had embraced her as one of their own. Quentin waited for her at the altar, tall and handsome in his best suit, his blue eyes never leaving her face as she approached. When she reached him, he took her hands in his, and she saw in his expression all the love and commitment she could ever hope for. Dearly beloved, the minister began, We are gathered here today to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. When they exchanged vows, Virginia's voice was clear and certain, and Quentin's deep tones carried to the back of the church as he promised to love, honor, and cherish her for all his days. As they sealed their marriage with a kiss, the congregation erupted in applause. Quentin swept Virginia into his arms, reminiscent of that first day when he had lifted her from the dust and carried her partway down the aisle before setting her gently on her feet, both of them laughing with joy. The celebration continued at the town hall, transformed with evergreen boughs and red ribbons for the occasion. There was music and dancing, a feast prepared by the women of Willow Creek, and enough cake to feed the entire county. Emma was passed from arm to arm, doted on by her many new aunts and uncles, though she reached happily for Quentin whenever he came near. As the evening wore on, Quentin led Virginia outside for a moment of quiet beneath the winter stars. The air was crisp but not bitterly cold, and the sky was a blanket of diamonds overhead. "Happy Mrs. Prescott?" Quentin asked, drawing her close. Virginia smiled up at him. "More than I ever thought possible again." "I have a wedding gift for you," Quentin said, reaching into his pocket. He withdrew a folded document and placed it in her hands. "I've been saving for this since I came to Willow Creek. It's the deed to a piece of land just outside town, 10 acres, with a view of the creek and the mountains beyond. There's a small house already built, but I thought we could expand it as our family grows." Virginia unfolded the paper with trembling fingers. "Our own home," she whispered. "A place for Emma to run and play," Quentin added. "Room for a garden, maybe some horses, and," he hesitated, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth, "room for more children, if you want them." Virginia's heart swelled with love. "I do want them, our children, yours and mine." Quentin bent to kiss her, a kiss full of promise for their future. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers. "I never thought I'd find someone like you, Virginia. When I saw you on that road, your baby crying in the dust, something inside me just knew. You were meant to be mine, and I was meant to be yours." Virginia touched his face, memorizing the feel of him. "No more tears," she whispered, echoing his words from that first day. "Only happiness from now on." "I can't promise no tears," Quentin said honestly. "Life has its sorrows, but I can promise you won't face them alone. Not ever again." They returned to the celebration hand in hand, greeted by cheers and well wishes. As Quentin swung Emma up into his arms, Virginia watched her husband and daughter together, her heart full to bursting with gratitude and love. From dust and despair, she had found her way to joy. From a moment of utter hopelessness on a lonely road, she had been lifted up literally and figuratively by the strong hands and gentle heart of Quentin Prescott. And though the path ahead might not always be smooth, Virginia knew with absolute certainty that they would walk it together, a family forged in adversity, but destined for happiness. 5 years later, Virginia stood on the porch of their expanded home, watching as Quentin taught Emma to ride her new pony in the fenced paddock nearby. At 6 years old, Emma was the image of her mother, with the same golden brown hair and determined spirit. She sat straight in the saddle, following Quentin's instructions with serious attention, while their 3-year-old twins, Thomas and Elizabeth, played in the grass under the watchful eye of Eliza, who had come for her weekly visit. The past 5 years had brought changes to Willow Creek. The railroad had finally reached them, bringing new settlers and opportunities. The school had grown enough to require an assistant teacher, and Virginia now divided her time between teaching and raising their children. Quentin had accepted the U.S. Marshal position, but arranged to remain based in Willow Creek, occasionally traveling to other towns in the territory when duty required. Their life together was not without challenges. Quentin's job still carried dangers, and there had been nights when Virginia had paced the floor, waiting for his return from pursuing some outlaw or another. But he had always come back to her, sometimes battered or exhausted, but alive and as devoted as ever. As Virginia watched her family, her hand drifted unconsciously to her stomach, where a new life was just beginning to make itself known. She hadn't told Quentin yet. She was waiting for the right moment, perhaps tonight after the children were asleep. Emma's delighted laugh rang out as the pony trotted in a circle, Quentin holding the lead rope and offering encouragement. The sound drew a smile to Virginia's lips. Her daughter had no memory of those desperate days after Thomas's death, no recollection of crying in the dust of that lonely road. She knew only the security of a loving home and the devotion of the man she called Pa, who had never once made her feel anything less than his own child. As if sensing her thoughts, Quentin looked up at that moment, his eyes finding Virginia on the porch. Even after 5 years of marriage, that look still made her heart skip a beat, the love and admiration in his gaze, a constant reminder of how fortunate they were to have found each other. He said something to Emma, then handed the lead rope to Robert, who had joined them at the paddock. With long strides, Quentin crossed the yard to the porch, taking the steps 2 at a time to reach Virginia. "You're looking mighty thoughtful, Mrs. Prescott," he observed, slipping an arm around her waist. "Everything all right?" Virginia leaned into his embrace, savoring the solid strength of him. "Everything is perfect," she assured him. "I was just thinking about how far we've come, how much has changed since that day you found us." Quentin's arm tightened around her. Even now, he didn't like to think about how close he had come to losing her, before he'd even found her, Virginia and Emma, alone and desperate on that dusty road. "Best day of my life," he murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. Though our wedding day might tie for first place, Virginia turned in his arms, reaching up to touch his face still handsome, though now bearing a few more lines around his eyes and a touch of silver at his temples. "I have something to tell you," she said softly. The tenderness in her voice caught his attention. "What is it, love?" Virginia took his hand and placed it gently over her stomach. "We're going to need another bedroom by spring." For a moment, Quentin stared at her, processing her words. Then his face broke into a radiant smile. "A baby? We're having another baby?" Virginia nodded, laughing at his joy. "Yes, Quentin. Another little Prescott to add to our brood." With a whoop that startled the chickens in the nearby yard, Quentin lifted Virginia off her feet, spinning her in a circle before setting her gently back on the porch. "Virginia Prescott, you make me the happiest man alive," he declared, his voice carrying across the yard and drawing curious looks from the children. "Pa," Emma called, sliding off her pony with Robert's help. "Why are you shouting?" Quentin exchanged a glance with Virginia, who nodded her permission. "Come here, all of you," he called to the children. "Your ma and I have some news." As their family gathered around them, Emma curious, the twins clinging to Eliza's skirts, Virginia watched Quentin's face, alight with pride and happiness. This was the life she had never dared to hope for after Thomas died. This was the family she had feared was forever beyond her reach. And it had all begun with a moment of despair, a baby crying in the dust, and a kind-hearted sheriff who had lifted them both and promised no more tears. That promise, like all the others Quentin had made to her, had been kept. There had been tears. Of course, tears of joy at their wedding, and at the births of their children, tears of worry when Quentin was late returning from a dangerous mission, tears of ordinary sorrows and everyday frustrations. But never again had Virginia felt the utter hopelessness of that day on the road. Never again had she been truly alone. As Quentin gathered their children close to share the news of their growing family, Virginia offered a silent prayer of gratitude for the journey that had brought them here, from dust to destiny, from despair to joy, from strangers to a family bound by the strongest ties of love and devotion. And when Quentin looked up at her over the children's heads, his blue eyes shining with the same love she had glimpsed that very first day, Virginia knew with absolute certainty that this man, these children, this life they had built together was exactly where she was meant to be.